full disclaimer, Final Fantasy VII as a whole is not bad. I repeat, it is not bad. If you hate-click this video and think that I'm going to be tearing into one of your most beloved and cherished video game experiences of all time, I'm not going to do that. It is not bad. It is one of the most impactful and influential video games of all time. I repeat, it is not bad. That being said, I know that a bunch of you have already made it down there to the comments and that dislike button, so you know, I tried. Final Fantasy VII's Materia system receives a ton of praise from everybody and their mother all the time. And I mean, I get it, especially considering the time period. It's incredibly flexible. You can play fast and loose with it and stumble into your own unique playstyle. It lets you build your party the way that you want, and you can experiment with insane builds and accomplish things that the developers may have never even imagined was possible when they were creating the system to begin with. All my homies love Materia. But hey, can we be honest with ourselves for a second? I mean, probably not. Y'all couldn't be honest about Silent Hill 2. I mean, that's for damn sure. The truth is, Final Fantasy VII's Materia system is great on disc 3, when you've already taken care of most of the content in the game. You know, when the game is basically over. Today, I'm going to be breaking down why Materia makes me sad in the original version of Final Fantasy VII, along with the different ways other games in this series have avoided similar problems. Trust me, no matter how much you or I love this game, it is not beating the allegations today. If you're watching this, I'm going to assume you're already quite familiar with Final Fantasy VII. It was admittedly kind of a big deal when it dropped in '97. To this day, it sold over 9 million copies, and it was a major gateway to JRPGs as a whole for the West. A style of game that had struggled to hit the mainstream audience over here. It got rave reviews and was sort of a cultural phenomenon, with its remake being one of the most highly anticipated projects of the last 20 years. It's a great game, full stop. The problems facing Materia don't really take anything away from that, but it does make it so that these days I prefer replaying a game like Final Fantasy VIII instead. That is a game with a comical amount of player choice and freedom, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. For now, let's just get into what exactly my gripes with Materia are. Let's take a look at progression in Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII famously begins in Midgar, with our main man Cloud taking on a job with local eco-terrorist organization Avalanche to take down a Mako reactor, owned and operated by the Shinra Electric Power Company. A Mako reactor is basically a huge refinement facility that drains and converts the very lifeblood of the planet itself, Mako, into electric power. This cannot continue, as it is slowly but surely killing the planet. When left to its own devices, Mako can crystallize and become usable as materia. That's how the characters in this game are able to use things like summons and magic. On a first playthrough, you'll likely spend about 8 hours on this section of the game. Maybe even longer if you struggle at all or you are new to these kinds of games. It is absolutely mind-boggling to me that during those 8 hours, which in some cases is the length of an entire game on its own, this is all the materia available to you. Is it sad? Yes. But on the bright side, it's your first playthrough. You don't yet know just how sad it is. Your ignorance is bliss. The issues really start to creep in if you happen to be the type of player who likes to experiment with their party, or you've already played the game once, and now you know what is possible. You've gained the forbidden knowledge. You've stood atop the mountain. You know that ice materia is totally useless throughout this entire section of the game. You know that grenades fucking grenades of all things are more useful than any spell you can get throughout the entirety of Disc 1. Look, that last one, I really wish I didn't know. I mean, shout out to 4-8 Productions, your vids are great, but I need you to know that you have ruined this game for me now, brother. Like, I really hate that that is information that I now know. Like, if I could get rid of it, I would gladly, because now the early game of Final Fantasy VII, on top of all the other problems that I'm going to get into, I got to consciously go out of my way to not just buy a bunch of grenades and plow my way through it. So I'm either having a faster experience that's bad, or I'm having a slower experience that is even worse. Not having any sort of advanced materia early on really hurts the game on a replay, and it would only serve to make a first playthrough more engaging. I mean, I can get through the Midgar section in like 4 to 6 hours these days, but still, that's 4 to 6 hours of absolutely nothing to prepare outside of battle, and nothing to consider in battle. Your equipment doesn't help either, because you're also going to be limited by materia slots that are available on your weapons and armor. Now you might be thinking, oh, but things get much better once we leave Midgar and step into the world map, right? Right, Xavier, right? This pacing problem continues once we leave Midgar. It's like 20 steps to the next town, and then you have to go through the extended flashback sequence with Cloud, where unsurprisingly, your materia setup doesn't matter. That's totally understandable and everything, but it is another thing that you gotta sit through whenever you replay this game. It's worth noting that a new player will get a glimpse of what's possible here thanks to Sephiroth's build, but it's not even that interesting. All Sephiroth has available to him is the basic elemental materias, all linked to the all materia for AoE damage. He uses fire for single target damage, and he has Restore. That's it. No red materia, no purple materia, no yellow materia, nothing. I think it would have been way more effective to show Sephiroth having some busted materia setup that maybe a player hadn't even considered up to that point, just to show the kind of insane stuff that is possible later on in the game. I mean, even something like an MP absorbed linked to that fire materia would be enough to get me to raise an eyebrow on a first playthrough. But I digress. What types of meaningful builds can you even make by the time you get to Calm? If you're anything like me, you'll find that you generally do the same thing every time you go through this game. Cloud has ice and lightning materia at the start. You gotta grab Cure in the reactor. You grab the free all materia in the Sector 7 slums. You get the cover materia from outside of Aerith's house. You'll grab Sense before the first trip to Wall Market, and proceed to never use it. You get the Steel materia after dealing with Don Corneo, and there's only a few things worth stealing on top of that. You pick up Fire and Poison in the Shinra building along with Elemental and another all materia through optional puzzles. And there you go. That's everything, excluding enemy skill materia, which I'll touch on here in a second. Essentially, all you're going to be doing is spamming basic attacks and limits, or grenades, with Tifa and Barret, because Cloud is going to be roided up on green materia thanks to his high magic stat, and since materia affects her stats in this game, it'll just push his magic stat even higher. Once Aerith joins, she will take over that role, because her base magic stat is even better than Cloud's. Why not build up both Cloud and Aerith with green materia in this scenario? I hear you asking? Well, battles in this game are super stingy with AP, so you're gonna grow way slower if you're trying to level 2 of the same materia instead of just 1. There's no real control over your party, there's no real control over how they're built, and there's no real way to leverage materia and play to their strengths. It really comes down to a lack of options and poor progression. The whole thing is just paced horribly. Now, like I mentioned earlier, you will also get the enemy skill materia while in the Shinra building. But there are no skills to learn in the Shinra building. There are some cool spells that you're able to pick up once you're on the world map, but those spells are so much further beyond the basic elemental spells Why would you ever go back to their trash single target damage? So in terms of efficiency, I usually have Cloud or Aerith loaded up with green materia, spamming AoE enemy skills like Matra Magic, and the rest of the party is throwing grenades from the back row. It's just a sad situation. Can you look at this and tell me that this is peak turn-based combat? Why would you ever do anything else once you have this knowledge? Well, the reason should be because you want to express your creativity by trying out different builds for the party. But even if we take the materia available to us all throughout Disc 1 into account, not just Midgar, it really doesn't open us up to make any sort of meaningful decisions with our party. That's why we're loading up on grenades, boy! Woo! The developers really pace this out so that everything that is super cool, you either have to access right before or literally inside of the Northern Crater. You know, the final dungeon of the game. As the saying goes, it's about the journey, not the destination. At that point in the game, I'm not going to want to grind to level any fresh new materia. It's just too little too late, in my opinion. These are the reasons why the original Final Fantasy VII is always a game I get hyped to replay, but then when I actually start that replay, I never make it to the end. I never make it back to the fun part. There are many ways to go about solving the pacing issues of the original Final Fantasy VII, and I believe that there are 2 games in the series that came up with solutions that I absolutely love. Final Fantasy VIII and Final Fantasy VII Remake. Final Fantasy VIII's approach is to make the progression system completely 100% open. You can craft Squall's best weapon on Disc 1 if you know how to do it, granting him access to one of the most powerful limit breaks in the game. You can play the card game to get access to materials needed to craft spells of a higher tier that you normally would have to level up quite a bit to draw from normal enemies. You can use the card function to transform enemies, keeping your level low in the process while shooting your stats to the heavens. You can ignore all of this and play the game traditionally, as you would Final Fantasy VII. But even then, you have more at your disposal when it comes to making specific character builds, especially because if you get the refinement abilities from your Guardian forces, you can even just turn things that you buy from shops like basic items into very powerful magic. You also don't have to worry about different characters having different materia slots or different armor slots available. Everybody is completely interchangeable. Everybody is a blank slate outside of their limit break. And speaking of limit breaks, enemy skill makes a return, this time as blue magic cast by Quistis. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but almost every spell in the game is available right at the start. It's just a matter of how much you want to grind for it. Primal Liquid actually has a great video on the subject where he talked about how strong you can get before even going to the first boss, Ifrit. So shoutouts to him, because it is crazy how far you can take the game that early. Final Fantasy VIII is the PlayStation 1 Final Fantasy game that I find myself coming back to the most. It's fun to sit down before a playthrough and sort of think about or plan how I'm going to build each character, and I really don't have to wait too long to get those builds going. I can grind them out pretty much whenever I want. Man, Final Fantasy VIII doesn't get enough love. All my capital G gamers know it's the best ones. Stop it. When it comes to Final Fantasy VII Remake, what a project this is. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. I do not envy the developers here. They were gonna catch flack with anything that was not one-to-one with the original game. That's just how it is. I absolutely love this game. But do I love its materia? Let's find out. Materia itself actually hasn't really changed, with many of the same spells on offer. But what did change is everything that was around materia. Final Fantasy VII Remake chose to lean way more into specific character classes and roles. You've got a lot of mechanics that are tied to certain characters and no one else. Aerith is this Mystic Tower style mage. not moving around the battlefield much, but instead setting up all sorts of different runes, sigils, and barriers that amplify her and the party's magical abilities. This is something that, no matter what, Cloud cannot do. Cloud flexes his skills as a soldier first class with 2 different fighting stances. In Punisher stance, he can let loose a flurry of attacks very quickly with high hit stun, but he is very committed to these attacks. He also cannot attack in midair while using this stance. Whereas in his operator stance, he's got his basic strikes, which are a little bit easier to control, but do less damage. Cloud also is able to apply the Berserk status effect to himself, boosting the damage he deals and takes by 30% for just a few seconds. This is also something that Aerith could never do. Even though throughout this game you do have a pretty limited pool of materia, the fact that these characters are so fully realized, so fully developed, means that the materia they have equipped just isn't as limiting of a factor. The characters of Remake are not so dependent on their materia setup to do cool stuff in battle. You could have Cloud rocking a pretty basic materia setup, but since it's wrapped in action combat instead of turn-based, it's just way more engaging to play. The materia also isn't drip-fed to you the same as it is in the original game. I'd say by chapter 6 or 7, about 1/3 of the way through the game, you can have some pretty solid character builds going. I always love to do this comparison of the very beginning of the original and the remake, but check this out. While the original has a sick train sequence and you fight these 2 guards right after, there is absolutely nothing going on here. I mean, not really. You're gonna attack twice and one-shot each guard. Simple. You can literally hold the X button to accomplish this. It just doesn't get the people going. It's sauceless. There is a lack of sauce. The original Final Fantasy VII doesn't give you any sauce at all until around the time of the Northern Crater, the end of the game. In the remake, we see Cloud just absolutely demolish these very same guards, and he is just dripping in sauce. It's beautiful. Tifa loves to see it. Final Fantasy VII Remake is just automatically way more engaging. It's a total vibe shift. I'm starting a new adventure that I'm going to be totally engaged with the entire time, as opposed to feeling like I'm going through the motions until the end when I finally can get creative or show any kind of player expression, but then with nothing to fight. You feel me? Taking things a step further, look at the first boss, the Guard Scorpion, in both games. During this fight in the original, all Cloud has available is ice and lightning. Barrett has nothing. All poor Barrett can do is spam attack and use his limit break when he gets it. And all Cloud is going to do is fire off lightning magic and limit breaks. You don't even have to respect the boss when it raises its tail and begins its counterattack phase. Just tank the hit to fill your limit breaks faster and get out of this damn fight. In the remake, you'll have Fire, Thunder, and Cure available between Cloud and Barrett. Even though the materia you have is very similar, the act of fighting this thing is wildly different between the games. The remake is obviously just way more complex. Hell, if it wasn't, we'd really have a problem. Now the Guard Scorpion has different phases, he's got different defenses, and he's highly mobile, even going so far as to jump outside of the main arena and fire on you from a distance. The level of player engagement is night and day, and all these extra systems make it so that the materia system actually gets a ton of the weight off its shoulders. Other systems like the action combat, highly specialized characters, and more complex enemies help elevate the materia system even further, while doing less. It was a really elegant solution in my opinion. As much as I respect the original Final Fantasy VII, I'd be lying if I said it was half as good of a video game as its remake. Now don't take all this as me saying that action combat is just better, because it's not. I'm not trying to say that action combat is better, I'm trying to say that the original game's biggest drawback for me are these gates to player progression. They serve to only hurt the experience on both a fresh and repeat playthrough. They just aren't needed. I don't know if the developers originally did it this way because they thought the system was pretty complex and they didn't want to overwhelm the player. Who knows? And maybe there's already a mod for this on PC, but I think that offering some way to get more advanced materia earlier in the game would really benefit Final Fantasy VII. If you played this game a million times like I have, and you're just going through the motions when it comes to the story and dialogue, to the point where you're not even reading it anymore, I mean, you know what they're talking about, then the only thing you have to hold the experience together is the gameplay. And when the gameplay is drip-fed to you in this manner, it's no wonder I end up bouncing off of it before I even get to Junon. Final Fantasy VII is and always will be a special game. I could never call it a bad game. It might just be that my time with it has finally come to an end. Or maybe I just need a break. Every time I've gone to replay the game in like the last 3 years or so, I've run into this problem. And as a result, I just stopped because I'm not having fun. But for now, the remake totally has me covered. And hey, the original will always be there when I want to give it another shake. If you actually made it this far, thanks for giving the video a chance. I never really see people talking about this aspect of Final Fantasy VII. You know, normally people are just talking about the narrative or the characters. So I'm really curious to see some of the comments on this one. Do you think that Final Fantasy VII's materia system is flawed? Did it need fixing? Do you think I'm an idiot? Be sure to let me know, and I'll see you in the next one. For now, I am off of this train.